I just was struck by how little I was. And I remember what I said is, I've been waiting a long time
Mm,
for someone to say this.
mm,
And then the wisdom was, please say this to me every day.
mm,
And that whole thing that you said about showering yourself with love. And one of the things I want to point out about your book is that it's not only about the rules, everybody, but I'm on page, for example, 71, where he's unpacking rule 2. And he has meditations in here where you can meditate on solitude. He has step by step guides for writing letters to your younger self. So it's not just the science and the rules, it's also the tools. And one of the other places that I want to go, Jay, because I think there's so many people that struggle with the beginning stages of love.
mhm,
And we were joking earlier about lust versus
mhm,
love
mhm,
and chemistry
mhm,
versus true connection. And in your research, you talk about the need for us to define love
mm,
for ourselves before we think about it, we feel it, and that we have to know the 4 phases of love.
mhm.
So you can walk us through like these 4 phases of love.
Yeah, absolutely. So,
And I want to try to figure out which one you're in and which one I'm in with
yeah,
our
yeah,
partners here.
absolutely, absolutely. And what's really interesting is that I found that someone can say, I love you, and it means they want to spend their life with you. And someone else can say, I love you, and it means they want to spend a night with you. And the definition of love can truly be that large of a spectrum, right? When someone says, I love you, you don't stop to say, wait, 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 what do you mean? You just say, I love you back. And what you forget in that moment is that you signed up to your contract of the word love, but they signed up to their contract of the word love. If their love meant, I like this right now, that's what they meant when they said, I love you. And if you said, I love you, and that meant, I want to be with you forever, then that's what you signed up for. And you never checked whether your contracts matched. You never checked whether your definitions matched. And the unhealthy part about that is you're expecting what you signed up to,
It's so true.
right? And so that's where it comes in. So the 4 phases of love are attraction,
Yep.
dreams, disappointments, and adapting, and trust.
Okay.
And so the first one is attraction, as we said.
Right.
You have an attraction, you get excited,
There's a
there's
spark.
a spark, there could be something there. Now, if there isn't a spark on the other side, that withers away, it's
Can
game
we just
over.
start
Oh,
right there?
yeah.
Because I think, especially, and again, mother of daughters
Yes.
and a son, but um, I'm more worried about it with our daughters.
Mm,
The attraction piece seems to flood everybody's ability to think.
yeah.
And what are like the red flags that this is the I love you tonight, don't text me tomorrow? And I have signed up for I love you means we're at least going to breakfast.
Yeah.
No, I'm serious because
Yeah.
as you think about the attraction phase, there
Mm,
has to be the spark. There has to be that moment where you're like,
absolutely.
I'd spend 200 hours with you, even though I don't even really know you right
Hmm,
now.
hmm.
What are red flags for when you realize my concept of what I'm signing up for is very different than what this person's concept is?
Yeah. So what's really interesting about the way I see red flags is I think a lot of people think red flags are things that other people show you.
Mm,
And for me, it's more about how strong your radar is and what you're looking for.
okay.
Because people just think, oh, someone's just going to show you all their flaws and mistakes. Very unlikely because most people walk into dating or meeting someone as a job interview. And so they're presenting their best selves. And so the way you know a red flag, the first one is the halo effect. You are giving them qualities that they've never shown you.
Give
So
me an
what I'll
example.
give you an example. If someone is attractive, you assume they must be trustworthy. If someone is smart or they went to a good school, you assume they must be organized at home. If someone is wealthy or famous, you assume they must be likable. So what we're doing is we're giving people qualities they haven't shown us.
Mm.
If someone is kind in the moment, we think they must be kind all the time. We've never seen whether they're kind when they're stressed. We've never seen when they're kind when they're tired. We've never seen if they're kind with their mom, their family, or anyone else. They've just shown us one moment of kindness, and we've amplified that to be that they're kind all the time. Another red flag is something called the context effect. So studies show that if you're holding a warm drink while on a date with someone, you're more likely to have warm feelings towards them.
Really?
Really, we're that biologically simple. The context effect also refers to if you bump into someone at a wedding, you're more likely to think that could be the one because love is all around.
No way.
Truly, the context effect is also that when you walk out of a theater and you just watched a romantic comedy and they went off into the sunset happily ever after, you're more likely to believe you're going to bump into someone that you could do that with. So we have to be so aware of, are we actually with this person in environments that don't promote and flourish love, but in the realities of
How
life?
the heck do you do that when your hormones are like going crazy? And yes, you've worked on knowing yourself
Yeah.
and what you love, but I just want to
Yeah. It's a great
I want to
question.
just come back to this idea of in the attraction phase
Yeah.
where you're not thinking rationally.
Hmm.
How do you notice this in yourself? Do you start like bargaining with yourself? You start to notice that you're crossing lines with your own values. What would you counsel somebody to really pay attention to if they
Yeah.
continue to fall into a problem
Yes.
of making themselves available to people who are not actually available to you?
Yeah. So the first thing that I'd look at is that person responding at the pace you're responding?
Oh,
Right? Is that person responding at the pace you're responding? Or are you constantly having to force play games? Are you spending a lot of time in? So, what's really interesting about what you're saying is that the biology shows also that that spark we feel at the beginning, what we're really experiencing is excitement and stress at the same time. So, the excitement is, I think they're hot. The stress is, do they think I'm hot?
yes.
The excitement is, oh my gosh, I just texted them. I have their number. The stress is, when are they going to text back?
Yes.
So we think chemistry and the spark is something that we just feel, but actually it's excitement and stress together. And what's really interesting is that as you get to know someone better, the stress decreases
Yes.
and comfort increases. So we think the spark's gone, but actually you've just become more comfortable in their presence. Now, how does this answer your question? The way it answers your question is the idea that you can't control your hormones. You are going to go through that. You are going to feel all of these things. What you have to do is get past those feelings as they naturally will,
Mm.
and then use your reasoning and logic to be thoughtful, to be mindful, and slow things down. And that's the number one thing I can say. Slow it down. You will make better decisions when you actually take time to see the other person, but take time to reflect.
Yeah.
Confusing being triggered with being in love. Dr.
Yep.
Franco, let's
Yep.
unpack this.
Yeah. So if you're anxiously attached and you're triggered, someone's triggering your wounds of abandonment and you're feeling high arousal because of that. You're feeling very strong emotions because you're feeling triggered and wounded. It's like hurt. Hurt is like a high arousal emotion, and so is excitement, and so is thrill, right? And so it can be easy to feel like I like this person because they're making me feel high arousal, which is high arousal is present in pain, high arousal is present in excitement. And so you're being pulled in. It's funny when I was like more anxiously attached to people, it'd be like I would want to be with this person until they'd want to be with me. And then I'd feel like, oh, and now I'm less excited for some reason, right? And that's a sign that, oh, I was being pulled in by this wound of abandonment that they were triggering that made me want to find my sense of self again through getting them to like me. It was like I was trying to get my sense of self through being in the relationship with this avoidant person. But in finding more security, it's more like I don't like feeling triggered. I don't like feeling like someone's going to abandon me and they're not going to show up for me. I no longer feel like that's sexy or enthralling because I have a more positive sense of myself and I look for relationships that reflect my own positive sense of myself. And And secure person is like on their own side and they're wanting to take care of themselves and make
Mm.
themselves feel safe, right? And so they're attracted to places that make them feel grounded and make them feel safe in that way.
Let's put the shoe on the other foot and talk about that same trigger versus love from an avoidant attachment person. What would they be feeling in terms of how they collapse, a situation that's triggering with love?
So here's the confusing thing about attachment. When you're falling in love, it can sometimes replace your attachment style a bit. So it may take you a year to kind of figure out what someone's attachment is. Like everything can be going great and you're connecting and there's a lot of intimacy building. And then a year in, once you start living together, you're just like, who is this person? Like all of a sudden they're so closed off. All of a sudden they're so demanding of me. Like what the heck happened? It's because like all of the like chemicals that are released, this cocktail of chemicals when you're falling in love can be so powerful that they might replace some of your underlying wounds and triggers and make you feel pulled
Mm.
into this relationship even when you're afraid of intimacy. So you can carry both of those things at the same time. So sometimes you'll see like people feeling secure with each other for a year when there's all of this cocktail of emotions. Avoidantly attached people feeling comfortable with connection and intimacy, right? And then after a year, after some time, all of a sudden, those avoidant feelings come up, and all of a sudden they're like, I want to get out of this. All of a sudden they're like, I need to pull away. All of a sudden they're like, I feel really suffocated. All of a sudden they're like, my partner expects too much out of me. And so that is the really confusing thing. That's why it's so like hard. I don't know, really pat on the back to all of us who are just able to sustain healthy relationships because it's so hard. But I think that's, what we can kind of tend to see. And I think the avoidant person, their template for intimacy is that people aren't going to respect their boundaries, is that they can't necessarily trust people. So when the anxiously attached person is like pushing too much or not respecting their boundaries and demanding a lot from them, again, that's part of their template for intimacy. It's not that someone's going to be loving and, hear them out and take their perspective into consideration. So in that way, the insecure attachment, it kind of fine tunes our expectations in relationships so that insecurely attached people, because their expectations of others are that other people will relate to them in an insecurely attached way, they're more willing to accept when someone does so in their life. Whereas the securely attached person, because their expectations of others is that you're going to treat me nicely, you're going to be loving towards me, you're going to be accepting of me, you're going to be kind toward me. When people aren't that way, they're like, this isn't good for me and this isn't a good fit for me.
It's interesting because as you're talking, I'm also thinking, boy, you see this play out in friendships too all the time, which is, of course, what your book is about, that, people collect best friends, and then all of a sudden, within a year, now they're collecting a new best friend and the other
Yep.
ones sort of faded away.
So what is love bombing?
So love bombing is it's where the charm and charisma turn into behavior. It's the early phase of any narcissistic relationship. We tend to only use this term for romantic relationships. It can happen in friendships, workplace, you name it, anywhere. It is this intense and overwhelming, I'm going to call it a courtship, where a person it's almost an obsessive fascination with you. Is a person trying to win you over. The classical kind of tropey love bombing is on your first date, you go to the best restaurant in town, then they get the concert tickets no one can get. And on your third date, you fly to Paris and you dance till 6 a.m. on the beach. And it's so exciting. And they make a scavenger hunt for you and they get you gifts. And every Friday, there's a dozen roses waiting for you. That's love bombing. It's fairy tale. It's larger than life. But I think if we only use that trope, it's tricky.
Yeah, I was just going to say,
it's too
who
simple.
can afford to do that? I'm like, that's
Well,
like how do you do that on a blue collar budget?
I'll tell you how.
Tell me how.
You take people to whatever's considered the best restaurant in, to your budget. Like the
Yes.
person's still going to think that's great. They'll say, let's go on a drive to wherever the cool place to go on
Got
the
it.
drive is. I'm going to show you the coolest view you've ever seen in your life. They'll buy things. It might not
It's
be
like the whisk you off your feet. I'm proving to
it's
you.
the good night, princess. good morning. I can't start my day without thinking about you. And then there'll be subtle things like take a picture where you're at. I just want to see where you're at. To me, that's this person stalking you. Why do they need to know where you're at? Of course, I am the anti-romance. Do not find me on Valentine's
of those
Day.
is fine, not like, but not on the like second date. Okay.
Right, but it's a lot of that. It's intense contact. But love bombing just doesn't look like that. Love bombing may become really intense, almost oversharing really early in the game. Like they're laying out like this really deep, profound, true or untrue story about their past, about their childhood, about what they're feeling. And for some people, that's the play, because they'll say, oh my gosh, this person's sharing so much. They're so vulnerable. And now you're kind of in because they've shared so much. Love bombing can be too much time together. Our first date lasted 2 weeks. Like, do you even have a job? Like, what kind of first date lasts 2 weeks? So, like, when people say that stuff are like, I knew right away. I was like, trauma bond. Like the minute people say that, I know that sounds so cold, but it's actually not. It is this sort of, people might say like when I first saw them, like I was really attracted to them, but not like I knew right away. But the 2-week first date, there's this intense intention. They spend so much time together. I canceled all my plans to be with them. It was so, their lease came up and yeah, we'd only been together a month, but we decided to move in together. Fast, 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 fast. The fastness is also a part of love bombing. It's an intensity. It's what I call an intense indoctrination into another person. They are winning you over. When you're being love bombed, you're so distracted by the sharing, by the obsession, by the texting, by the emails, by the gifts, by the quickness that you're not noticing the red flags.
So what do you do if you're a friend? Because I think oftentimes, if you see this happening to a friend, or you as the friend on the outside start to have the red flags go up, and you say something to your friend, maybe you guys should take it a little easier, or I hear he wasn't that great with his last girlfriend, or like you just tried. Like, how do you approach it if you're the friend?
Don't drop a dime on the other person, because the minute you try
What do you mean, drop
like,
a dime?
Meanings like, I heard they weren't great with their other person. He's moving real fast. It's something we learned from doing treatment with substance users is do not make them defend their behavior, and don't make him defend the narcissist. The minute you say he wasn't great with his former partner, yeah, have you ever met his former partner? And now they're defending them. Never do that. You got to find the back door.
So how do you find the back
You
door
say
with a
things
loved
like,
one?
You say, how are you, talk to me about your new relationship. How are you feeling? How are you doing? And they'll tell you the story. Wow, that's a lot happening. How do you feel about that? You might be more likely for them to say, yeah, it is a lot. Like, I'm trying to go with it because I've always thought like I don't deserve a fairy tale. Now I'm getting the fairy tale, and say, what feels fairy tale-ish about that to you? You're trying to get them to talk without getting them to defend the narcissistic person. Listen, I'm basically trying right now to train people to use therapy tricks here. Right. But that's really what it is, because I think we're so quick to say, I don't like him. The first thing they're going to do is defend him. You've got to get them to talk about the relationship, so they start spilling on like, oh, I don't know about this. What do you mean you don't know about this? And let them talk and say, well, if you're feeling like that, do you think there's, do you feel okay? Maybe, I don't know, like take a step back. Like you can do that, because it sounds like this person cares about you so much. And I mean, that's a little manipulative, but if you're trying to save someone, you try all the tricks. But what you're trying to do is give them permission, maybe to slow down, to pull back, or like saying, he wants to move in right away, and say, you love having your own place. So how do you feel about that? Get them to talk about the thing that they value, which is the having their own place, versus what kind of fool wants to move into your apartment in a month?
Right. I got it. That's very, very clear. So if you're spotting this, just get them to talk. Open-ended questions. Do not say anything that makes them defend. So interesting. I can look backwards now and see as a parent several mistakes that I made.
Because as parents too, Mel, we're so quick in there to want to protect our kids. I think nowhere else do we see that reactive, like bad. And it's almost like you can feel the clenching in yourself of saying, well, talk to me about this friendship. And inside you're like, leave them. I hope you never talk to them again. But you can't, because everybody, when they're ambivalent about something, and we raise the thing that they're ambivalent about as being bad, their reactive response is to defend that thing because they're ambivalent.
It makes a lot of sense.
Was there a moment that you had an epiphany or like what freaking happened?
Yeah, I'd love to tell you.
Okay.
So
Maybe you should give everybody a little background
I
of
will.
Oakley before he
I
loved
will.
himself. Okay.
So to give context, 13, I feel like you start to become very self-conscious, like 11 and so on. Like 11, like 13 is when it really, like 11 to 13 is when it starts.
Yep.
I think that's when it begins. So I'd say that I started to be a little self-conscious when I was 13. I had very short hair, like so short to the point where it wasn't even curly like it is now. It was blue and red and bleach and pink, and it was every color. It was every color.
Why was it every color?
Because I really wanted to just do that. I woke up one day and I was like, I want that. I want that. And then like a few months later, I was like, oh my God, I don't want this. And I couldn't do anything about it because my whole head was literally a different color. So I think that's when I started to be like, oh, like, I don't know. Like, I'm not liking myself right now. And also like, I feel like I was definitely struggling with weight issue. I don't know. I'd look at myself and look at, I was 13. It was weird.
Yeah, but what would you look in the mirror and see?
Chubby cheeks, double chin, man boobs, moobs. Get out of the shower and be like, ugh, no. And I was 13. Like, I was so young.
You told me a story once
Yeah,
about
the jeans.
Yeah.
Yeah, so 7th grade Oakley, bleached hair, no eyebrows. I didn't have eyebrows.
Well, they hadn't.
They
They
grown
were
in.
there,
They hadn't like.
but they were
they
really, really
were
blonde.
very blonde. So it looked like I had no eyebrows. I had blonde hair, and for one day I wore skinny jeans, and I just like liked how they felt. Like I liked the look of skinny jeans on me, so I continued to wear them every single day. Like
I remember this.
October to like April, and
Yep.
like. You know that first day in April where it like is just warm enough where you can like not have to wear a sweatshirt or like wear shorts for the first time and you're like, fuck yeah, like winter's over.
Yes.
And so I'm like, fuck yeah, like winter's over. Like let me throw on a pair of shorts. And I go to school. I'm so excited. And like nobody even says good morning. The first thing everybody says is your legs look so weird. And I was like what? Like this is the first time I'm ever not wearing like jeans and everybody's making fun of my legs. And I'm like, oh my God. So for the rest of the year, I wore jeans, even in like 70 and 80 degree weather, because I was so worried about people being like, your legs look weird.
That's so sad.
I know, because I was just like, oh my God, they think my legs look weird. Like, I don't want to stand out. I don't want them to look at my legs.
What was it like that day at school with shorts on, having had somebody
It was like,
say
no,
publicly?
it was more than one person. More than multiple people said my legs look weird. It was like, I just wanted to find a pair of jeans. I wanted to find a pair of pants anywhere. I would have fucking taken anything. I would have worn leggings. Like, I don't care. Give me literally anything other than shorts and I will be fine. But I just like, I didn't even want, it's not that I wanted to leave. I just like wanted to get the attention away from myself and I had no idea what to do or how to do it. So I just kind of like sat there and thought about it all day. And I was like, my legs do look weird. And like, it's not even because they were like picking on me. It was just like, they've never seen my legs before. But anyways, so very self-conscious, very like, it continued into 8th grade. And then
What happened? Because this sounds terrible.
What changed?
Yeah, what changed?
Well,
Because I think we can all relate to this, where you look in the mirror and you
you're
focus
like-
on what you don't like.
yeah.
You have an experience of just wanting the attention to be off you, or wanting people to accept you, or wanting to fit in. Every single one of us can relate to that Gene story, Oakley. And I think we discount how these tiny moments where somebody picks on you or criticizes something about your appearance or your voice or your height or your skin color, how it affects us. It stays with you forever. You know, I can remember, as you're talking, an incident that happened in my life. It was 9th grade, and this movie Flashdance was super popular. Jennifer Beals was the star of it. And I was so in love with that movie that I marched right to my mom's hairdresser and asked them to give me a Jennifer Beals perm. Now, to get curly hair like Jennifer Beals,
You had to get layers first. And then I got a perm. I walked out of there and I looked like a labradoodle. Tight curls, wavy, big moppy perm head. I thought it was fantastic. And so the next day I go to School Oak and I'm wearing a sweatshirt, of course, with my shoulder exposed because that was the flash dance look. I didn't even take dance classes. I had my bouncy, full, new Jennifer Beals poodle perm. And I walked in and I'll never forget walking down that hall, just like you with the jeans. It wasn't one person that pointed out the perm. It wasn't one person that laughed. It was like everybody in that hallway. And I went home that night, just like you went home and you never wore shorts again. I went home that night and washed my hair about 25 times to try to wash the perm out, which you actually can't do. It just makes it frizzier. What happens in those moments is that none of us, when we're kids, have the ability to turn to the people criticizing us and be like, you freaking idiots. My legs are fine. What we do in those moments where we feel separate is we turn against ourselves. And it's those tiny moments that happen over and over and over again where we turn against ourselves and we become obsessed with making other people not pick on us or like us or fitting in. That's where we lose that connection to self. Like, because when you turn against yourself, it's literally an act of self-hatred. So what happened next for you?
All right. So what happens is 8th grade comes around.
Now, would you say at this point you like didn't like yourself, or like where were you about
There were
your
times where I
relationship with
did.
Oak?
It was very like, I'd say it was like 70-30. Liked myself 30%, didn't like myself 70%.
Okay.
But 8th grade, you know, I'm older. I look a little bit older. It was a good year. I'd say it was a good year. Like I kind of like wore shorts, thankfully. I kind of got over that. I wore shorts. I kept wearing sweatshirts though. The top half of my body was a big like, no thank you. Cause I like my boobs, my man boobs. They were not it. It was like, oh my God.
Okay. This is
But anyways,
fascinating
we're
because
getting to the point.
I
Oh, wait.
never thought you had man boobs.
I did. I'd get out of the shower and I'd like take a step and I'd like see him like go
Big
up and
jiggle?
I'd be like, no, dude.
We're talking about what I've learned in the last couple years about marriage. And my husband and I, as you now know, have been married for 26 years. We've been together for 28 years. We started seeing a marriage counselor, a therapist, whatever you call him. He's amazing. Dr. Cooper. I love this man. Thank you, Dr. Cooper, if you're listening. I want to share with you kind of 6 observations that I have from my personal experience about why it matters, why it's important to work on it, and what you need to do if you do want to repair a relationship that's broken or you want to improve and continue to grow together. So the first thing is you have to be intentional and say to yourself, I am going to turn this around. I'm going to make it better. Because there's no half-assing your marriage. You have to decide to make it better. Wishing it were better is what you're already doing. And it's very different than committing to make it better. Nothing in life is going to change until you make a decision to change it. And then you have to schedule in what you're doing with your partner to change it. And see, I look at marriage as this sort of like living thing. It's like a container in which you and your partner either grow or you wither and dry. I know that sounds like brutal and dramatic, but it's true. And if your marriage or your friendship matters to you, make it a fucking priority. It's really simple. If you want anything to grow, I mean, this is common sense. You got to care for it. You have to tend to it. You got to water it with kindness, with interest, with support. You have to tend to both your and your partner's ongoing growth. I mean, it's critical to your marriage. And I've said this a bazillion times, and I'm going to keep reminding you, our marriage is not perfect. It's not the ideal. It is ideal for us. And I've already shared with you that there were years that are wonderful, where we were wonderful to each other, where we were together all the time and investing in each other's growth and growing together. And then there were those years that sucked. We caused each other a lot of pain. And I want you to view the painful stuff in a relationship like weeds in a garden. Over time, if you're not careful, those weeds, they fucking take over. So do not ignore the little shitty stuff because weeds, they start out as this tiny little thing. And then have you ever noticed you like go away from your garden for a couple days and it rains and then the sun comes out and these teeny little weeds are like 5 feet tall? That's the little shitty, irritating stuff. Talk about it. Ask for what you need. Clear the air. Do not harbor resentment. And I'm telling you, therapy, if you can afford it, get yourself to therapy. It is a gift. Chris and I were already talking to an individual therapist, but that's not working on your marriage, by the way. That's working on yourself. And you should work on yourself. But it wasn't until we came together and made it a priority that things really started to shift. And one of the things that I love about talking to a therapist is that for me, I get more out of a 45-minute call with a therapist. We have never met our therapist in person. We do the entire thing virtually. But hitting the pause button every other week to truly unpack something that happened between the two of us, listen to one another. That's the hard part for me, I'm learning. To learn about one another. This is better than any damn date night could ever be. Because we're not just like going out and having time alone, we're actually investing in our growth. That's very different than having a steak and a bottle of wine. Like we're digging out the weeds in our relationships so that things can blossom and bloom so that when we do go out for that meal and that night out, it's actually more than just a dinner date. It's something that has real depth to it. So for you, if you can't afford therapy, I totally get it, but I totally understand. I have been in that place in my life. There are free online courses you can take together. There are books that you could read together. In fact, the episode that we just released, Dr. Nicola Pera, her brand new workbook, How to Meet Yourself, is a guided journey through knowing yourself better. You could use that. $25. Use that to make your marriage better. So there are things that you can do if you get intentional. So, number 2, this is also something that is critical. It seems like common sense, but you got to do it. You got to develop a genuine sense of interest again in the person. You were interested when you first met them. Remember that? But I bet along the way, you started to decide, oh, I know everything I know about this stupid person. Ugh, there they go again. Eye roll. Well, in therapy, I learned a lot about Chris that I didn't know. And I'm going to say it again. In therapy, I learned a lot about my husband that I didn't know. And I'm talking 24 years into marriage, things that I didn't know. I'm not talking about deep, dark secrets. I'm talking about the way that his thoughts and his feelings impact him. And like, for example, I had no idea how traumatized Chris was by his childhood because it wasn't like anything horrific happened to him. And his mom is one of my closest friends, but he was a latchkey kid. His parents were always working. His brothers were way older. Nobody was ever around. And so it was this sort of slow death march of isolation and feeling constantly alone. His experience was when I get home, nobody's there. When I play baseball, nobody shows up. That if I ask for something, I get teased. Nobody listens. So he stopped asking. In fact, he stopped asking to such a degree that he used to have a nickname in his family. When he was little, you know what they called my husband? The Monument. You want to know why? Because he didn't talk for 2 years. And everybody laughs about it. It was like some big joke. And the truth is, it's actually really sad. I mean, they laughed about it because nobody knew any better. And because he was just a little kid that felt like he was unseen and wasn't worthy of love, his needs didn't matter. He didn't know how to ask, or it just shut him down even more. And so I learned that part of the reason why he never asked for anything is because his experience growing up is that nobody gave a shit. And that helped me go from being annoyed at how quiet he is to really wanting to help support him. Because the fact is, he isn't the most effusive person. He's not the hardy har har guy. He's a deep thinker. And being interested, yes, it means be interested in somebody's hobbies. be interested in what happened to them, be interested in what they're saying. But it also means be interested in learning more about them as a human being. And we're all guilty of assuming we know someone just because we've known them for a long time. So, starting today, here's how you can apply this. Assume, starting today, that you don't know a lot about the person that you're with, that there's a whole part of them to discover. And I'm not talking about some deep, dark secret. I'm just talking about how they feel, how their childhood impacted them. Just think about yourself for a minute. When I think about how much I've changed, my God, in the last 4 years, emotionally, spiritually, mentally, I've lived that in my own mind and body. Unless you talk about it and listen to each other, you're not going to know that. I can give you another example of how little we know about each other. So, when I was hosting this daytime talk show, we did an episode where Chris was on, and there was this like marriage expert relationship person. And Chris revealed on national television that when it comes to being intimate, he prefers to have sex in the morning. I had been married to the guy for 22 years. I had no idea that's what he preferred. So you're not going to really get connected to someone unless you're interested in learning more about them. So ask more questions, be more curious. And that interest also means be loud and celebratory. I've been working on this. I mean, Chris, as he's leading his men's retreat called Soul Degree, I'm cheering for him. As he is pursuing a master's in spiritual psychology, I am rooting for him. As he is studying and getting a certificate to be a death doula, I am like clearing the schedule, making sure he's got time to do that. As he is pursuing a certification to do integration therapy for the new psychedelic modalities, I'm like all in. Him feeling supported and celebrated, that makes him know that I'm not only interested, but that I love him enough to be supportive in the things that he wants to do. And of course, he is cheering loud for me. And this isn't just obvious, this is also researched. Celebrating and sharing wins is critical. It's probably one of the reasons why you're roommates. You need to start pointing out what's going right instead of griping about the shit that's going wrong. Researchers from UCLA discovered that the single most crucial factor in tightening or destroying a bond that you have with your partner is how you react to good news in one another's lives. How you react to good news, based on research, way more important than how you react to any bad news. And here's why. You see, researchers found that celebrating your partner gives your partner an emotional lift. Whereas playing down big news, like, oh, that's okay, it leaves a lasting chill. And so you can start implementing that practice immediately. The next time your partner has something good happen, big or small, celebrate that shit. Show them how proud you are. Give them a high five, hug them. And if they don't have something amazing going on, freaking call it out. Thank you for taking the dog out. Thank you for doing this. The small things really matter because when they're ignored, those small things become weeds and resentment that grow and that separate the two of you. Now, the third thing, we did an entire episode on this. I call it Get on the Fun Bus. I'm serious. In therapy, one thing that I said over and over to Chris is this: our life is too serious, man. I am so sick and tired of talking about all this serious shit. I am tired of the problems. I am tired of just feeling like life is a grind. We need to have more fucking fun. And the thing about fun, and we talked about this on the episode about having fun with your family around the holidays, is you're not having fun unless you plan to have fun. I think we all make the mistake of thinking that, oh, fun has to be spontaneous. No. When you were little, your parents planned all the fun shit you did. And so you got to get serious about inserting fun again. In fact, I want to share a story with you. This is how important this is and how this simple concept infuses a dead relationship with new energy. It infuses that roommate syndrome that you may be feeling with this new rhythm and fun that can happen. Instead of that slow quitting, you can pick up the fun again and start to reinvest in each other. And I'm telling you right now, the more that you can bring fun back into your relationship, just like you did when you were dating, in the beginning. Remember those days? There's a reason why dating is fun, because you're planning fun things to do. Just this past weekend, we had flown from southern Vermont to Northern California to go to a business meeting. And we had 90 minutes before we had to get to the start of this business meeting. And as we're driving from the San Francisco airport, I'm like, oh my God, have you ever seen the Redwood Forest? I think Muir Woods is right here. Neither one of us had never been there. So we pull off the highway. It is 4:15 at night. The Muir Woods National Forest is closing in 45 minutes. There is a dark, looming rain cloud coming, and it looks like it's about to rain horizontally. We drive straight to Muir Woods with 30 minutes to spare. We were the only ones there. It was so fun. And there were this dark, cloudy sky, so it felt like we were in a Hobbit movie. We hadn't planned it. It was so fun. And it reminded me we need to do more of that. So, the fastest way to create more energy, go see a great movie. Go exercise or hike together. Take dancing lessons. Cook something new. Check out a concert. Head to a theme park. Ride a roller coaster. Go skinny dipping. It doesn't matter what you do. Do something that you used to do when you were dating. Just make it fun. And what if your partner doesn't want to do any of these fun things? Total bump on the log. All right. Well, when we come back, I have somebody who's struggling with that, and we're going to hear her question next. All right, welcome back. I'm Mel Robbins, and we're talking about the things that I have learned after being married for 26 years and being in and working with a marriage therapist with my husband for the past 2 years. And so we've covered a couple of them, and now I want to address a question that I am getting a lot. And this one comes from a listener named Jen.
Hey Mel, it's Jen. How do we continue to move forward through the change process with a partner who's not willing to move forward too, or at least encourage you? There's a huge gap coming, and it's really scary. Thanks so much, Mel. We appreciate everything that you do.
You know, I can kind of hear the fear in your voice, Jen. It is scary when you get to a point where you realize that you've grown apart from somebody that you used to know. But first, remember, if underneath all that you still truly love this person and you're willing to work on it, you can absolutely make it better. And it's worth doing the work on. But your question is something that I get a lot. Your partner's not encouraging you, and your partner sounds like doesn't want to do the work. So I'm going to address this, and I want to just make sure that there are two aspects to this question of your partner not wanting to move forward, not wanting to join you, not encouraging you. So there is two situations where that's true, and one of them is not that big of a deal, and one of them is a really big deal. So if you're with somebody that doesn't want to do the things that you want to do, they're not interested in having fun. For example, like let's say my husband really wanted to go to a dude ranch. I personally have zero interest in doing that. I do not want to move forward with that idea. I once went to a dude ranch to celebrate my dad's 70th birthday, and I got bucked off a horse and broke my leg and my tailbone. Not interested in that. However, it is important if you want to go the distance. I believe this so much that you are able to do things on your own and you are supported in that. So it's very different to say that your partner doesn't want to be the plus one in your professional dancing career, or they don't want to be the plus one in your desire to scale Mount Kilimanjaro. That's cool. You should pursue things separately from one another. You should have friends that you go off and do things with. You should have goals and hobbies that are yours alone. But I don't think that's what you're asking. I think what you're asking is, what do I do if I want to work on this, but my husband will not go to therapy? My husband will not address the problems. My partner or wife will not do the work. If you're in that situation where you're willing and you love this person and they refuse to go to therapy, it's not going to work. You can go to therapy alone, but you will not be working on your marriage. You'll be working on yourself. And yes, therapy will change you for the better. And it might just change some of your habits and your mindset. So that changes the dynamic in your marriage. But to me, that's really a marriage of enduring. It's a marriage that you're surviving because you're with somebody that's not willing to meet you halfway. And when you're in a relationship and the other person won't work on it, what's going to happen is, and I've seen this happen over and over and over again, is the one person who's willing to go to therapy, who's willing to look in the mirror, who's willing to work on themselves, you know what they tend to do? They work themselves to a new level and right on out of that marriage. That's what happens. Because if you don't continue to grow with somebody, you're going to grow to resent them. And that is a scary place. But my only kind of recommendation is you got to keep asking. You got to work on yourself. And at some point, there will become a time where you're going to say, it's not negotiable. In order for me to stay in this relationship, you have to be able to do X, Y, Z. And if you can't do those things, then I can't stay in this because you're not willing to work on it. And I hope it doesn't come to that. Now, another thing that has made a big difference in our relationship in the last couple of years, bringing us much closer together, is reversing roles. So this is not some sort of like thing you're going to do in the bedroom, although you can. This is not the thing that I'm referring to, although maybe Chris and I should try that. But what I'm talking about is sort of the default roles that you both play in your relationship. So I used to be the person, and this is probably due to my anxiety, where I was the one that was always planning everything. I would pick the restaurants, I'd set the agenda, I would bulldoze the path forward. And here's what I learned in therapy. That in me moving so fast all the time and always taking control, it created two major problems. Problem number one, Chris had zero room to step in and take the lead and take care of me. And the more I just did it, I just took care of it, I just picked the restaurant, the more I made Chris feel really concerned that if he tried to do those things, I wouldn't like what he did. And so my busyness, my proactiveness, my anxiety about it, my just get it done, get it done, get it done, get it done, it literally made his silence and his thinking worse because there was no room for him to do anything. And second, and here's where the real kicker came, I started to feel like everything was always up to me and that if I didn't do it, nobody would do it. And, it's funny because this dynamic that I created because of my sort of anxious and go-getter nature literally was the reason why this happened. I would do everything and then be like, why the hell are you doing something? Why is it always me doing something? And then Chris would go like, well, because you're always doing something and I never have time to do something. And I would like to do something, but you've already done that thing. And so we were just locked in this. We were physically together, but having a massive disconnection in our emotional experience of being together. And that theme showed up over and over and over again in therapy. In fact, when Dr. Cooper said to us, you guys are great at transaction, you're sequestered emotionally. That's exactly what he meant. That you're great at doing all this shit, Mel. And you're great at doing all your shit, Chris, but you're in your own corners emotionally and you're not aware of how one another is feeling. So, how are we changing that? Well, there's a lot of slowing down, I'm learning, when you are changing a relationship for the better. Because what you're really changing in your relationship when you change it for the better is you are breaking apart the old patterns and you are replacing them with new ways of showing up. And so, again, it's like habits that you need to break and replace and a muscle that you need to rep. And so, me personally, I'm working on stepping back instead of just racing ahead full throttle. And I am giving Chris the lead on planning and organizing. I mean, the man does design and lead men's retreats for crying out loud. So, for example, when our anniversary came up, normally I would pick what we're going to do. I would do all this kind of stuff. And, I also noticed that I have this propensity to be like, oh, no, that's okay. You don't have to get anything. Oh, no, 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 I don't need anything. Let's not do presents this year. And then I'd be pissed off that there were no presents. So the poor guy couldn't win. I told you I was the asshole in this relationship. So I said to Chris, why don't you just take the reins. Don't even tell me what we're doing. And it was incredible. He surprised me and booked this place that was literally less than an hour away from us in southern Vermont. We took a few days off to just unplug and eat phenomenal food and sleep without the dog waking us up at 5:30 in the morning. And Chris surprised me. It was on our 26th wedding anniversary. On that first night with this stunning ring and vows that he had written out. And, the ring was really insane because Chris had not given me a piece of jewelry that he had picked out and bought for me since our engagement ring. I'm going to say that again. In 26 years, Chris had not picked out and given me a piece of jewelry since our engagement ring. I had always pointed things out and told him what to get and again, managed that. And what had happened is a year ago, we were deep in therapy and I was out in Vegas to give a speech and Chris had come with me. And as a lark, one night before we were about to pull into the elevators at the hotel, we walked into this jewelry store and I tried on this crazy ring. And little did I know, Chris had called the store after we left Vegas, got the details, and had a jeweler back home make it. And he had been holding on to it for months, waiting for the right time to give it to me. Now, I, of course, had nothing to give to him, but it was incredible. And, after that experience, I nicknamed him the trip leader because I realized that the moments in life that I feel the safest and the most in love with him are not when he's giving me jewelry, it's when he's the leader. He's blazing the trail when we're hiking. He's setting up camp when we're camping. He is really doing what he does best, which ironically is planning. In fact, he's so good at it, I might never, ever plan a thing again. And one other thing I want to say about that when our 25th wedding anniversary hit, things were so bad between us, we didn't do anything. I mean, imagine making it to 25 years and being in a state in your marriage where you're like, I don't even feel like celebrating. We have so much work to do to find our way back to one another after all the shit that we have been through these past couple years and how far apart we feel from one another and how much resentment has built up. And for him, how much shame and regret. And for me, shame and regret too, that on our 25th wedding anniversary, we didn't do anything. We didn't celebrate. We didn't post about it. We didn't toast. We just let the day come and we let the day go. And so for us to get to a point a year later where he and I have been working hard to truly address the things that went sideways and to hear one another and to be interested in one another's experience and feelings and be interested in showing up and changing, that's what we were actually celebrating. That's why there were new vows. And that's what's possible when both of you are willing to do the work. And so the fifth thing is you got to ask for what you need. It's taken me 20 some years to just ask for what I need. This is a novel idea, but instead of being pissed off at your partner, why not just ask for what you need? It's a lot easier than being angry and annoyed all the time. And I think a lot of us get into trouble. This is that sort of slow, quiet quitting that I was talking about, because we show up in a relationship and we expect our partner to behave the same way we wish they would. And we don't ever fully communicate what we actually need. And they don't ever fully communicate what they need. I gave you the example of us being married for 20 years and me not even knowing that Chris prefers to be intimate in the morning. Never talked about it. Like that's dumb. Why not just talk about it? It just is so obvious. I'll give you another example. I love flowers. I mean, I love, love, love flowers. I have parents that turned a wooded plot of land in suburban West Michigan into this gorgeous, gorgeous perennial garden. And I just love flowers. It reminds me of my childhood. I love taking care of them. I love growing them. And I love buying myself flowers. Nothing makes me happier than going to the grocery store. And if I see a little bouquet of tulips or daffodils, I mean, I'm talking $3, $4. You don't have to like buy the roses. I just love having fresh flowers in my house. And when Chris goes to the grocery store and he buys a bundle of tulips for me, it's like, oh my God, you were thinking about me and you know this about me. It took me a long time to tell Chris that. Do you know what was happening instead? For years, when I would travel, I would take off on a Monday to go give a bunch of speeches. I'd return home on a Friday, like a lot of you do that travel for work, that are road warriors out there. And I would come home, and you know what would be on the kitchen counter when I got home? A vase full of the dead flowers that I had bought for myself that nobody in the family had bothered to pull out of the vase while I was gone. And when I would walk in and see those dead flowers, that was a sign to me that nobody even thought about me while I was gone. Nobody was expecting me to come home tonight. Nobody was excited for me to come home. And so one day I said to Chris, you know, it would mean a lot to me if when I come home from a business trip, or hell, whenever you go to the grocery store, if you just picked up flowers. Because when I see, I'm talking grocery store flowers, people. I'm not talking go to the florist. I'm saying the bare minimum. When there's a little bundle of tulips sitting in a plastic vase on the counter or a mason jar, it makes me know that you're thinking of me. And I'll tell you, that's all it took. Every time the man goes to the grocery store, he returns with flowers, and it puts the biggest freaking smile on my face. So ask. Instead of punishing somebody, instead of quietly quitting, get loud about what you want. And in return, ask your partner to get loud about what they need from you. Don't assume that you know your partner's love language or what they wish that you were doing. Just ask them and start doing it. And finally, this is a big one. Assume good intent. One of the things that I've learned about my husband, Chris, it's been a reminder, really. And this is one of those things that happens when you really slow down and you get present with the person, whether it's your spouse or your partner or a friend, is that my husband's just like, he's just like a really nice guy. There's not a mean bone in Christopher Robin's body. And I get so worked up in my own shit that I forget that. I just forget that he's not out to be an asshole. He's not trying to screw me over. He's not some dickhead that's doing the. He's just a nice guy who's doing his best. And see, I think we forget that. If you deep down still love the person that you're with, but there's all this crap that's built up, find your way to anchor there. Assume good intent. Assume that they didn't mean to use that tone of voice, that they didn't mean to frustrate you, that they didn't mean to fail at whatever they failed at, that they didn't mean. Assume good intent. Remember the person that you fell in love with, because I believe that person is still deep down in there. But any relationship, whether it's a friendship or a family relationship or a love relationship that goes the distance, there's shit that builds up. But the person who they are at their core, that doesn't change. That doesn't change. And so if your response to me saying, assume good intent is, oh, Christ, Mel. I mean, you should like, and you're starting to make a case about the person you're with. There's your answer. Get out. If you can't even admit that at their core, this is a good person, this is a nice person, then get out, because you're with somebody that's not a nice person. You're more committed to making your case and being right about this than you are about seeing something deeper that's worth working for. And to me, that's the bottom line, because that's what I've learned through these past challenging years and at times very painful changes in years that we've been through. that if you're both willing to look a little deeper and remind yourself of why you loved him in the first place, if you're both willing to look in the mirror and work on yourselves and your relationship, you can work through anything. You really can. You can get through some horrific things. You can get through things that seem insurmountable, whether it is addiction or the death of a loved one or cheating or bankruptcy. You can get through all kinds of things if you're both willing to work on yourselves and your relationship. If you're willing to remember that deep down, you're with somebody that is a good person at heart that maybe lost their way, that your relationship is a living, breathing, organic thing, a place where you're either going to grow or you're going to wither and die. You got to care for it. You got to tend to it. You got to shower it with kindness and genuine interest and support. And please, dear God, can we start having some fucking fun? I mean, let's just stop waiting for another couple to invite you over and start throwing some dinner parties and some dance parties and some playlists and have some fun. Like maybe it's that we've all gotten a little too serious. Save the serious talk for your therapy sessions and bring the fun to the rest of your life. Bring your inner life to the surface. And I'm telling you, your connection will not only grow, but it will also grow strong. And in case no one else tells you today, I hope that your partner or your friend tells you this, but in case they don't, I'm going to tell you, I love you and I believe in you. And I believe in your ability to create a better life and better relationships. And how about you start putting what I just shared with you to work right now?
Learning how to change means developing a different relationship with commitment. You can't have an all or nothing relationship with commitment. It can't be, I was good, I was committed, and I followed through and I was good, or I broke my commitment and I was bad. So, that mindset, you're screwed.
So what do you do with that person who says, okay, we're going to do the 30 days of not drinking and I'm going to try the tools. And day 8 rolls around and it's a beautiful sunset. Or it's a really bad day at work. Or you get really, really horrible news. The last time I wasn't drinking, I got news that a friend of ours died. And I was like, fuck this shit. I'm having a cocktail. So if I were doing the 30 days with you, what is the data? Like, what can I learn from that day where I didn't keep my commitment to myself?
Yeah. Okay. So there's a process, right, that I have people go through to actually look back and understand what was happening in the moment, right? Like when you were saying, fuck this shit, what was going on? What were you saying, fuck this shit to?
Life being hard, commitment being hard, sticking to my 30-day promise being hard. Probably if I go a little, that's at the surface. If I go a little bit deeper, it was being really pissed off and really sad that my friend had died and wanting to just like numb it out, like not have to feel anything, and sticking to a commitment or a new or changing, like developing those new neural paths. That's hard work. And so I did not want to have to work hard at like sticking to a promise when all I wanted to do was fucking have a drink and lay down on the couch and cry about my friend.
Yeah. I mean, so all of a sudden we get to see it like through the lens of like, oh, it was sadness. It was grief. It was the belief that like this emotion is too big. It's too much. I can't handle it. I don't want to be with it. I shouldn't have to be with it, which also so normal.
Yeah.
And so it's like, yeah, of course your brain went to the thing that it's like, I know how we get out. Like, I know the shortcut. Here's the shortcut to not have to feel our emotions. We have the drink.
That's the lower brain, right?
Yeah.
That's the lower brain going, I recognize this pattern.
Right. And so all of a sudden it's like, oh, okay, this wasn't me breaking my commitment and being bad. This was me in the moment of having all of this pain and sadness bubble up, not feeling like I had an alternative for how to manage it or handle it.
How does recognizing that help you have a stronger muscle when it comes to commitment?
Well, when
because
you
you're right,
think
because
about
I'm
it,
sitting here going, I totally agree with you. All or nothing when it comes to commitment. You're either good or you're bad. You either have
Yep.
integrity or you don't. You either stick to your promises or you're a fuck up and you never will. Like, like that kind of thinking. And if I take on a 30-day challenge and I fuck it up on day 12, then I fucked up the whole thing.
right. But remember, what did I say the goal of the challenge was?
It's not to not drink for 30 days.
No, I know. It's like,
Isn't it to
everyone's
not
like,
drink
it's
for
not
30?
drinking, right? We said not drinking. It's not drinking.
The goal was to use the tools.
Use the tools.
But I didn't
committing
lose
to
the
using
tools,
the
so I
tools.
actually didn't do the challenge. See how quick I am to go bad, Mel.
Okay, so now we don't. So like this happens on day 2. So day 3, we can't go back to using the tools.
Yeah, we can.
Yeah. And we just make progress so much faster, right? When we're not, it's kind of like, oh, well, I tried and that didn't work. Now it was bad. Now I'm going to go into a shame spiral. And I'm either just going to stop trying, right? Because it's like, see, nothing works. And I'm just
Right.
going to give up. Or I would either go into the okay, nothing works. Let's just F it. I just have permission to drink and eat and do all the things that I want to do. Or I would go into the place of okay, now we're going to make this super crazy restrictive rule because I was so bad. But deep down, I know I can't follow it at all.
People do that on diets nonstop.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
see
exact same
such
thing.
a direct parallel with the way we are all around eating.
Yeah.
And I want to go back to my breakthrough just a couple minutes ago, because I'm starting to see that if you take on a 30-day challenge like this to use the tools and to use the tools to not drink for 30 days as a way to learn and develop the muscle of commitment and understanding yourself better. If you screw up on day 2 or 12 or 28, and then you bash yourself for not having a perfect streak, the likelihood is I would then just bail on the challenge altogether, because the amount of shame I would throw at myself and the conflict I would feel would be so much that I'd want to turn it off by having a drink.
Yeah. Except what if it wasn't a screw up? What if you didn't make a mistake? And I don't mean, I mean, what if the decision to say yes to the drink wasn't a mistake? It wasn't a screw up.
Well, how could it not be if I am making a commitment?
Because maybe it's trying to give you insight into something that you are missing, like a skill that you don't have, or a response that you don't have to an excuse, or something that you're, you're not aware of. Maybe you don't have the awareness, so I'm using it as a boundary. And maybe it's that moment where you're like, okay, I tried and then it didn't work and I said yes. And then when you go back and look, it's oh, we can't get awareness just by being perfect. I think that's the misconception.
Ooh. You're right, you can't. And I just had another insight. The more I talk to you, the deeper we're going. Here's my big insight. I don't know if we have enough time to talk about this one. I realized that I hate being told what to do.
Oh, yeah, me too.
Even by myself. It's like this rebel thing. You're not going to tell me what to do. Even if I said I want to do this thing, I'm not going to do that thing that I said that I would do. I'll show you. Is that a normal thing that you hear with people?
Yes, this is a huge thing. I often talk to people when they're really struggling. It's okay, so what is the language that you're using to say no to the drink? And they're like, well, I'm just saying that I can't have a drink. Okay, when you tell yourself you can't have a drink, how does that make you feel? Pissed off.
Yes.
Yeah, but here's the thing. It's not even true that you can't have a drink.
Explain that.
You're like, but we said we can't. Well, I mean, you're an adult woman. We're living in a country where alcohol is accessible. You have money, arguably, like you have an app, maybe it will deliver. You have a car. Like, of course you can drink. You're choosing to say no. Like there's such a, like, this is, probably because my father was an English teacher. And so he's always like hounding the importance of words.
Yeah.
But there's such a big difference between like when I tell myself I can't have something versus, okay, I'm choosing not to, and here's why. It still might feel a little uncomfortable for me, but I'm not pissed. I'm not seeking to rebel.
Hey, it's Mel. Thank you so much for being here. If you enjoyed that video, by God, please subscribe because I don't want you to miss a thing. Thank you so much for being here. We've got so much amazing stuff coming. Thank you so much for sending this stuff to your friends and your family. I love you. We create these videos for you. So make sure you subscribe. Mwah.